welcome to, I call this Building Connections is what my YouTube video is that I've called it. So Building Connections, I usually am talking about something that somebody's interested in hearing about, some sort of topic. And then I got thinking, well, why not interview Carol about her book? And I knew that you had just done a book launch recently for Home For Susannah. Yeah, so tell us about your book launch experience on Facebook. What was that like?
It was actually interesting. I had been very nervous about doing it to start with because it's technology and I'm not very familiar with that. But it turned out way better than I expected. I was able to connect with some people I haven't connected with for a while, and that fits right into your connections theme.
Yeah.
The actual hour-long live presentation. Oh, looking back at it, there's always things to critique and figure out how I could do it better. But overall, I was pleased for the first attempt, for sure.
That's excellent. Awesome. Well, the way we know each other is through Toastmasters. And I always knew that you were a wonderful speaker and a great storyteller live. And I never really made the connection till later on that you were also a writer, which makes sense, but I didn't really know. But can't wait to get into your story with Susannah. But how did you, my understanding is you were more usually into nonfiction. So how did you do the switch over into this is a fiction book, correct? This Susannah?
This is fiction. It has some nuggets of truth in it. That's the starting point for it. And I think most fiction usually does, whether it's something that the author has lived or family stories or something off the news. We see that even in television programs, right? Mm-hmm. But I basically wrote nonfiction. And my grandson said to me a few years ago, he says, "Grandma, you should write fiction." I said, "But I don't do that. I don't know how to start it. I don't know what to do." And he says, "You tell us the stories. So take some of those stories that are like maybe family stories and fill in the blanks, because of course you don't know all the details." And that's what I did eventually. I must admit I ignored him for a while. And then he kept asking. And so I finally decided I'm going to try it. I felt a little overwhelmed at first, and then something I read or heard from another writer who wrote fiction is they wrote it as the scenes. So you obviously compile all the scenes. Well, I can write one little short scene and then the next short scene and the next one, and the marvelous technology of computers, you just can take that scene and put it wherever it belongs in the book. And so it worked, and that's how I was able to make that transition. Yeah.
Wow, what a great idea. It kind of makes me think about even just in life, we take those little one step at a time. We're never taking on a whole project at a time. It's usually just one little step. And you could do that with writing a book. That's empowering, because I feel like I often felt the same way. Well, I can't write a book because it's too big and it's just too much. But the little chopping it into pieces, bite-sized chunks, that's awesome. And then the scenes, because I think things kind of come to you probably like, oh, we could do it this way. Did that happen?
Exactly. And it's like, okay, I know this little piece really did happen, but what happened next? Nobody ever talked about the everyday stuff back then because they were too busy living it. And I had to do some research and find out what life was like back in 1899 to 1903 and go from there and say, well, if other people did this, maybe this family did this as well. And of course, for the present day, I love history. I love stories. And I love finding those unexpected treasures that might have been put away by some family member long ago. And so having the present day character of Barb find a journal and be able to go back into the past. It just made sense to me. I could understand her point of view really easily.
Wow. So maybe this is a good time to just tell me or tell us a little bit of an overview of the book without giving out any of the wonderful details or anything. Just a quick little theme or overview of what your book is about.
Well, it turned into what they would call a dual time because it starts in the present with a lady named Barb, who is in her 60s and has felt like she was forced to move back to the family home that had been left to her. Her husband really wants to move to small town Saskatchewan. She wants to stay in the city. And so there's a bit of conflict that starts with that. And she's now trying to figure out herself, I guess, basically. Finds a journal and takes journeys back into the past to learn about her great-grandparents and how they homesteaded close to that area. And so all of the things to go with homesteading and just beginning a brand new life far away from family without all the easy connections that we have today. So even, you know, I can go to the store that's like a block away and buy whatever I need. For them, it was a journey of a day to get to the store and then a day to come home if they had a lot. And you didn't do that all the time. And just to find out, like, what would that be like? So Barb takes this journey partly to discover herself and how she fits into her family as she discovers her ancestors' journey to this new land and all the things that they go through. And they go through some pretty hard things.
Huh.
Yeah. So that's kind of the overview. You're going to go back and forth, past and present, journey of discovery in many ways.
Wow. That's really fascinating. It's kind of a coincidence. My mom and I were sitting around. I usually go for walks in the morning, and I dropped by her place and we got talking about her journals and how much she loves to write. And I was telling her, yeah, I'm going to be interviewing with Carol today. And then she goes, you know, I really could have been a writer. And I go, oh yeah, what are you thinking? And she, well, I'm always journaling. And it's true. She's writing everything down every day. And then we were like, oh, well, you could have kept those journals like all of these years, because she actually just burns them and like gets rid of them. But it would have been neat for my daughter or down, you know, or son down the road could have read her journals and heard what she's thinking and what she's experiencing.
I also journal, and sometimes I think, do I want them to read it? Because there's times where it's been really tough stuff, and you just sort of, when you journal, you just pour out all of those hurts and anger and questions and frustrations in your journal, because of course you're not going to hurt the journal's feelings by doing that. Yeah. But then do you want somebody else down the road to read that? So I kind of get where your mom might want to burn them.
Yes.
There's times where I'm thinking maybe that's what should happen with mine. Yeah. But then there's those other parts of the journals that are everyday experiences that we don't usually talk about. But down the road, they will be different for your children than they were for your mother. For ourselves, the parts of my journals when we lived way up north in isolation, my kids will have a great time finding out about that. Yes. And so in this case, the great-grandfather does journal, and so does the great-grandmother, which was not necessarily as usual as it is today. And so to find these little bits, but of course they only wrote about the important things because paper and pencils and pens and ink and all that was not easy to come by, nor did they have the time to do a lot of journaling. So yeah, to find these little scraps or a letter or something like that would be just amazing.
So how did you do the research for the book? Where did you find out the information to kind of fill in those? You're right. So that like the journals would have had the highlights, or even the letters would have had the highlights of what was going on. But in the book, you're filling in some of those blanks. So how did you find out that info?
Well, the provincial archives have a lot of things about homesteading on them. So it had all of the information about what it would take to file for a homestead, how you could prove the homestead, what was required and when it was required. All those type of things were really easy to find in the provincial archives. I I went and took a drive around that area. I went to the church that's talked about in the book that was started by the settlers that moved into there, and they had some really good archives about sort of starting the church in the area and some of the people that were instrumental. What else did I do? I went to the municipal office and I could look at the map and I could kind of look at it without looking at where the roads go between places nowadays to see how far it was for them by horseback or by wagon to go someplace. There was some family history stuff that I had that I could go back, and so I could fill in some blanks, but not a lot. So it's from just a variety of places.
Oh, that must have been so interesting. History is fascinating, and I guess once you start digging around, a lot of it's recorded. So, bonus.
We did actually go to a place where they rebuilt a sod house, and we were able to walk into it, and so you get that whole feeling of how dark it was, what it smelled like, and then try to imagine living there. It was it was an interesting part of the research, and I'm very glad I didn't have to live in a sod house.
Yeah, sometimes we can romanticize what it was like back in the good old days. But, I think it was a lot of hard work and a lot of hours put in compared to what we do today, just for living. You know, doing your laundry, gathering food, etc. Just surviving was a full-time job.
It was. It really was.
All right. So how did you know what to keep in your story and what not to write about? I could imagine the book could go on and on forever. And how do you decide what's those special things that you want to keep in the book, and or how does it make an impact, or how did you decide?
How did I decide? That's a good question. I actually started by writing the second book in the series, and I did it more in just writing about the past and realized that Susannah's story needed to be told in more detail. And so I sort of changed gears and I began to write this one, and then one day the dual time frame came to meet as to how to get into it. And what needed to be kept in there needed to be the key elements of Susannah's story, like how they got married, coming up here, what her thoughts were about that, starting a family, what she thought about living in a sod house, those type of things. So some of those key things. And then I added into that, of course, what it might have looked like and what a day might look like for them, or the year, or things like that. And then afterwards, my wonderful editor went through and she goes, I think this is a bit redundant, or I don't think this adds to the story.
Okay.
And so without her, it would have been even harder to figure out what needed to get pulled out of it.
That makes sense.
And we didn't pull a lot out.
Yeah, that makes sense. From writing essays at university, I think for me that would be the closest piece to writing a book, is it was the same. You know, you had to figure out what were those golden nuggets to keep, or what helped bring clarification, and what was not really working, or maybe even added confusion by too much information sometimes.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes too much information.
What about the writing process itself? Like, which parts do you enjoy the most and the least?
Editing is probably the least. I think every writer I've ever talked to is probably the same answer. There's a few that don't mind it, but a lot of us, it's the tedious part, going through it almost word by word at that last final edit, when you're making sure that your grammar is correct and the punctuation is correct, and just does it flow? Things like that. So that final tedious one, and by that time you have lived with this story, you have read it, you have reread it, you have reread it again, however many times, and it's almost to the point you're going like, okay, I'm done. I want to go work on something else now. So that's probably the least favorite. Most favorite, I love the research. I love
I
the
knew it. I knew it.
The research is so much fun, and that goes right back to high school when or college when I'd research for essays. I loved the research almost more than the writing. And then, of course, when that book finally is published and you have your copy in your hand, I'm not sure if there's anything more exciting than that.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's got to be neat to have that thing in your hand totally complete. And I really love the shape of it. We talked about when we first met back a couple weeks ago. The shape just kind of added to this, so it really feels great in your hand. You can just slip it right in your purse.
I call it my happy accident. I had planned to make it a little bit bigger than that as far as width and height, but I told my artist granddaughter the wrong size to do her painting, which then would become the cover. And so that's why it's this size, because the other granddaughter who did the digital part of it was afraid to enlarge the picture in case she lost some of the just the depth and everything of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even though her sister told her, go ahead, it's okay, it can be enlarged. And we stuck with the original size of the canvas and added the spine to it.
So are you saying your granddaughter built the front of the book or the cover? Is that what you're saying?
One of my granddaughters drew the whole picture front and back as a painting. She painted that picture based on a synopsis of the book. She's not read the book yet. It is just based on a synopsis.
Right.
And she captured the book. She made it look like an old journal page with a crocus that would have been dried into the journal, and maybe later on a picture of or a painting of the old sod house. And then her sister does graphic design, and she took the painting and she made it into what you needed to be able to have it printed, added the words, added the spine, and so that was how the cover came to be.
Well, that's exciting. I like it when family gets involved because usually you have such a great resource in family. They can help out. Just today, my son was helping me with some technical issues on my computer, or I need him for something. And, you know, there's even just a fresh set of eyes. It's great to have family helping out. That's awesome.
It is. And I so appreciate my granddaughter's artwork. And I want to encourage her to be able to show it off.
Yeah.
Proud grandma, but
Yeah.
she's actually got a lot of comments and compliments from professors and other people on her artwork as well. So this is just another avenue that she can have it showcased.
Yes. Now that cat is really, I'm just going to grab that cat.
I can hear your cat now.
Come on then. Come on. Come on, kitty. Come on. It's funny because you let them in and then they want out, and just a little kitten. So they're not
Just
sure what they
needed to
want.
check where you were.
Yeah. Yeah. And wants to be close, I guess. So I get to be a mother again with the little kitten.
There you go.
Yeah. You coming
Kittens
over?
are so cute.
They are. Can we come here? Oh, okay. All right then. Okay. So the next question is there a part of this? Is this part of a series, or are you going back to nonfiction?
It is part of a series.
Oh.
Book 2 is already written. It's in the revision editing stage.
Wow.
Hopefully it'll be out beginning of the new year. The series is called Prairie Hope.
Prairie Hope. Oh, that's
Prairie
beautiful.
Hope. Yeah. So, and book 3, 4, and maybe 5 of the ideas are there, but I'll intersperse them with some nonfiction as well.
So what's next, I guess? And sounds like you're already on a journey with more about Susannah. So is that the where you're going to keep on heading down that path?
I'm working on obviously book 2, the revisions of it, and it's going to focus a little bit more on Susannah's daughter Anna
Okay.
as a girl growing up on the prairies here.
Mhm.
And so the successive books in the series will focus a little bit more on different generations of the family,
Mhm.
but always going back to where it started, obviously. And then I have some nonfiction that I'm working on, and so pulling together some short pieces to put them together as a compilation of shorter meditation type of things. So
Wow.
working on those type of things is always something to do.
Yeah. So what is your writing routine? Is that something you do on a daily basis, or is just does it just come to you, or like how does that look?
I try and write Monday to Friday a little bit each day. It doesn't always happen, of course. Life interferes, but I sort of keep Sunday for family things and Saturday to catch up on housework. Mornings tend to work the best, but sometimes mornings get busy, so then I'll try and grab a little bit of time in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I've realized over the course of writing for the last 10 years that if an idea comes to me, I better go find some paper and pen and write it down, because otherwise I will forget it. And so I've been known to get up and go and write jot notes, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And if I don't, I won't be able to sleep, because I'll lay there going, am I going to remember this? Am I going to remember this?
I can believe that. Even if I have things that come to mind or good, oh, I should have said it this way, or good quotes or anything, or oh, I got to remember to do this. It's best for me to go write it down for sure too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I've got another question here. What would you suggest to someone who's thinking about writing, or to someone who has already written something and wants to know the next step?
Well, if you're thinking about writing a story, whether it's somebody like your mom who's journaled for years and she could pull out all kinds of tidbits from her life growing up, a memoir, like just even to leave for her family,
Yeah.
go ahead and start writing.
Mm.
That's the key. You can't edit a blank page.
No.
Definitely. I've heard that told me so many times. And don't worry about making it perfect right away.
Oh,
Just get the ideas out there. Turn off the editor brain and turn off that need for perfection, and get it down on paper or type it into a document on your computer, something, right?
yeah.
Just so that it's captured for posterity, for family. If it's to go beyond family, then get some editing done on it. So if you've already written something that you think should go beyond family, then make sure it's edited. And it doesn't matter how many times we look at it ourselves, we start reading it the way we know it should be.
Yeah.
We miss the mistakes, and that doesn't matter who we are. I don't care how many books you've sold or if it's your first attempt at writing. We need those extra set of eyes.
Yes.
And the best way to do it is to get it down there, and then somebody you trust first, just to read it for readability, and um, does it capture their attention? And after that, you can find an editor and pay an editor. It's worth it. I just finished reading an ebook on that had been published on Smashwords, so it's a self-publishing one,
Yeah.
and they had not edited it. And I couldn't turn my editor brain off. They
Oh,
had a really good idea for a story. Their premise was good, their characters were good, and the writing got in the way. I did finish it just because I wanted to see how she wrapped it all up. I think it was a female writer. And so anybody can publish these days fairly simply for an ebook. but still get it edited. I
Yeah.
mean,
So,
this one is self-published because it's done through Kindle Direct Publishing on Amazon.
okay.
But I, first of all, got somebody that I really trust. My niece, actually, she is, she's really good at picking out things. Like she says, do you think this really would have happened in like 1902? Maybe I should research some more. Or I really like the way you put this. This left me questioning. I need some more information here. And so it's really good to have one or two people like that, advanced readers that will really honestly look for things that could help improve it. Not just read it and say, oh yeah, it's good. It's the same as in Toastmasters, right? If we get up and give a speech and our evaluator just says, oh yeah, it's good, we don't learn anything from it. But if they say, well, it was really good, but
Yeah.
if you could improve it by doing this or that, and we work on that, we come out with a better presentation, or in this case, a better story. And then I paid an editor. I hired an editor. It's Little Details Editing in Calgary.
Okay.
And she goes through it with a fine-tooth comb and comes back with all kinds of red marks on it. She also comments on things like that she likes about it as well. And then I do all the fixes. It's still my choice on some of the questions she has. Do I add things in? Do I delete this? Do I really want it? And we go back and forth a few times until finally it's what we consider ready for publication. And you know yourself probably, and anybody who listens to this knows that you could pick up a book by a famous author from a big publishing house and little details will escape their attention.
Yes.
They might forget a capital, or they might repeat a word or something like that. The better it's edited, the less of those things you're going to find, though. So my goal when I have self-published things has always been to have it well edited so that the best possible product goes out to the readers and that the writing doesn't get in the way of the story.
Right.
So not guaranteeing perfection by any means, because we're human beings and we can miss things.
Yeah. So would you be willing to share what kind of price are we talking about to have someone edit a book of this size?
It's usually, most editors charge per word.
Okay.
And so it varies. That is what I have found out in looking for editors. It can vary from, in this case, I paid around, what did I pay? Around $600 to get this edited.
Okay.
Up to $1,000 for that same size book.
Yeah.
Or higher. So it depends on a few things. It depends on how much editing is needed. Like if it's a really substantive edit where it's not just your grammar and your punctuation and the flow of the story, but it's like almost having to rewrite parts of it. It's going to cost you a little bit more money, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, you were lucky to have it was your niece that kind of did a pre-edit for you?
She didn't really, like she said, she's horrible at grammar and punctuation, but some of those details that are important in the story, like could this really have happened in 1902?
Okay.
Was this really the way people talk? She will pick up those things, and yes, that helps with the early revisions.
Yes, that makes sense. Something I noticed here, because we had been communicating back and forth, and you said a thoughtful theme and some takeaways writing it and the Facebook launch. I have you saying we can learn from the past, but must live our lives moving forward, and that sometimes takes a lot of work. I thought that was really nice. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Well, it's just a quote that I started using a while ago when I was doing some speaking, and as I thought about it, we really can learn from the past if we choose to. But we can't dwell in the past and stay stuck in the past. We need to keep moving forward. Our lives continue. we might have setbacks. Right now, we're all in the same kind of setback of restrictions from COVID,
Yeah.
but we have a choice in our attitude. We can stay stuck here, make the best of it, and we can move on.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same if, like Barb in the book, she's lost her parents. She's been stuck for months in that grief. And now she's got to come to that point where, is she going to stay stuck in the grief, or is she going to move forward? And it's going to take work.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact of everybody's life. We need to keep on living.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I first opened the book and I read the first few pages, and she was talking about losing her parents, and it just brought back all those feelings of losing my dad last April, and it's still pretty raw. And I was sitting with my mom again at breakfast this morning, and I don't know, Dad came up somehow, and then she just goes, "I guess we never get over it." And I think she's right. We never get over it. We carry on, and we bring him along with us, but the loss is, I mean, we can't replace him. He's gone.
No. When I was writing this, I'd lost my dad not very long before that. Well, yeah, he died in 2016. So not very long before that. And it was hard to write about it because I kept thinking of my dad.
Yeah.
And those feelings. And sometimes, in 2018, so a couple of years, even those couple of years, it was still moments of rawness. They just happened to come farther apart, I guess. But shortly after he passed away, I was out on a speaking engagement at camp, and I met some very wonderful camp. The camp director's wife was fantastic, and they had a camp grandma there that week who I just really connected with just about immediately. There was just this connection, maybe because we were both grandmas, I don't know, but I think it went beyond that. And I shared with them how tears might come pretty easily that week because it hadn't been long. And they said, that's okay. They'd be there for me. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to hold it together for this week. I'm going to get through this. It's going to be good. I'm going to have some downtime. And then I walked into breakfast the one morning, and they were making pancakes for breakfast, which was my dad's favorite.
Oh.
And I stood there, and the campers they'd all gone through first, and I'm standing there with tears pouring down my face. And I thought, okay, we'll cry. They were there to comfort, to be there and say it's okay. Then I walked in at lunch that same day, and they were having homemade soup, which was another of my dad's favorites. And I'm thinking, this is only Tuesday. How am I going to get through till Friday? But after that very tearful day, I was able to tell some of the good memories of my dad. And the rest of the week ended up being such a blessing. The connections, the beauty of the scenery, just being able to be there. And my dad had known he was dying and told me that if he was gone, I should go to camp and speak. So I had gone with his blessing, but the grief was pretty raw. And when I started writing about Barb, it was pretty easy to think about how she would be feeling. Yeah.
Which makes the book even better, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's not nonfiction. You've done some research to understand what happened during those times, and then to pour some of your own emotion into it. It can't help but come out. So nonfiction and fiction are going to cross over in this book. I can see that already.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Names have been changed to protect the innocent or the guilty, whichever way you want to look at it. It's a book of courage and determination and faith and very positive things in the midst of a very difficult time. both in the present for Barb and in the past for homesteaders. And so I think it is the intersection of fiction and nonfiction and how we can go forward. So I think they're innocent. I think we just you change family names because that's what you do as a writer. And you invent other names, but the names of the places are real.
Yes.
Yeah.
Going back to camp there when you talked about pancakes, our dads must have been similar, because definitely pancakes were my dad's favorite breakfast, or hot mush as he would call it, oatmeal or something, Red River cereal. So we grew up with that for sure. And then when you said homemade soup, oh yeah, he loved the homemade soup. Every time he came, I'd always make a big pot of soup for him, special something, anything, because he just loved homemade soup.
Yeah, so did my dad, and he loved Red River cereal as well.
Yeah. Right on track. So where can our viewers, where can they get the book? And
it's available on Amazon, both as an ebook and a paperback. It's available on Kobo as an ebook. And anybody that lives in the Saskatoon area that wants a copyright from me, I'm available as well. And they could get a hold of me at my email address, which is carol@carolscorner.ca.
Awesome.
And I would deliver.
Yeah, and you would probably even sign it by the looks of it.
I would, yes.
Fabulous, fabulous. Is there a passage somewhere in the book that you'd like to share with us to give us a little taste? Something that you think would be a good little, I didn't prepare you for that.
Toastmasters comes in handy then, right?
It sure does. You never know what's going to get thrown at you.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, some little passage that you, I guess even just the beginning could work, or if there's something that you would like to share.
I'll make you cry if I read the beginning.
I'll cry again for sure.
I'll jump forward a little bit from that to where she's upstairs in the attic, trying to check some things out, because she's finally decided that it's time to see what's up there. She has kids coming home for Christmas, and the house really hasn't been made her own yet. And she decided this particular day it was time to investigate and see which furniture pieces that generations of the family had stored up there could be maybe brought down, and she could make the different rooms her own. And so that's where she is right now, is up in the attic.
What page are you on?
16.
16?
Yes.
Page 16, okay.
She pushed aside a few boxes and added others to the pile that needed to be sorted later. She panted with the exertion, tugging the high chest away from the wall. Several more sneezes erupted as she brushed her salt and pepper bangs out of her eyes. I really need to get a haircut. The top drawer emitted a high-pitched screech as she pulled it open and peered inside. Wiping her hands on her worn work jeans, she lifted pieces of material out and placed them in an old basket she had discovered under the window. One more drawer protested as she opened it, but the other three slid easily enough. Barb paused and wiped the sweat from her face with the back of her hand. I'll need to find someone to give all this material to. One more thing I've never been good at, sewing and quilting. Not like my mom and grandma always were. She shook her head when she realized she had muttered out loud, as if anyone could hear her, before attempting to squeeze behind the piece of furniture. She pushed it forward further to allow her extra pounds to squish into the tight space. Soft and cuddly, Pete always said. Downright overweight by many pounds is more like it, she thought. Finally managing to make space for her to fit between the chest and the slope of the wall, Barb grabbed the small flashlight from the pocket of her jeans and shone it towards the back of the chest.
Nice. Nice. the cat had to get involved in all of that. Of course. Wow, beautiful. I like the way you express, I don't know, just how she's kind of feeling and thinking through your words. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, she was feeling pretty down about herself and about her circumstances, and it also gives you the first clue that maybe she doesn't know how she fits in the family. Because mom and grandma were good at sewing and quilting, but she also leaves us thinking that maybe they were good at other things she wasn't good at.
Yeah. Sometimes it is hard deciding where we fit in with the family, and I think maybe when people leave the family, there's almost like a shift. Like sometimes I feel maybe my brother in a way is trying to, he is, I guess he's kind of taking over for my dad in some ways, and I'm taking over for my dad in some ways with my mom, you know. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but
I don't know. And sometimes we assume that everybody else fits into the family and we don't.
yeah.
And yet when we talk to them, if they were really honest with us, what would they tell us? Maybe we would be surprised.
Yeah, maybe we would.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. I think we'll sign off. And
Okay. This was fun. Thank you.
yeah, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad that we had the time today. I know everybody's schedule is full, but it's great to talk about such an important thing that you're working on right now, an important nonfiction book, which is kind of cool. And I see that it's overlapping with real life. And of course, that's going to touch our hearts when we read this. So thank you so much for sharing. And
You're welcome.
have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.
Okay.
Enjoy your kitty.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.